Most people think hikes at the Grand Canyon are hard because they're long, yet that's not actually what gets people. The rude reality of hiking into the canyon is that you are always doing the easier part first. The real problem is what happens when you get to the bottom, turn around, and realize the hardest half of the hike is still ahead of you. In this episode, I'm ranking the hardest day hikes in the Grand Canyon, not by popularity, not by scenery, by real world difficulty, elevation gain, heat exposure, terrain, and how quickly people misjudge what they're really getting into. And to be clear, this isn't about discouraging anyone. It's about understanding what you're signing up for so the canyon doesn't surprise you halfway through a very long conversation with your legs. We're going to break these into three tiers so that you can actually understand where each hike sits in terms of difficulty. Tier 3 is brutal yet manageable if you respect it. Tier 2 is serious day hiking where mistakes start to cost you. And Tier 1 is the Grand Canyon's biggest challenges. So starting off with Tier 1, the Grand Canyon's biggest challenges, and of course, I'm starting off strong with the rim to river to rim hike on South Kaibab and or Bright Angel trails. This is the most important hike in the entire park to understand because it's the one people underestimate the most. Hiking from the South Rim to the Colorado River and back up again in one day. The full rim to rim mileage varies depending on the route you take. So, like the South Kaibab Trail is about 6.3 miles one way with roughly 4,780 feet of elevation loss. Bright Angel Trail is closer to 10 miles depending on where you start your climb, and it has similar elevation gain coming out. So taking South Kaibab down and up is about 12.5 miles. Bright Angel both ways is almost 20 miles. And if you combine the two and have different views the whole time, it's about 16 miles total. Now, the reason this hike belongs in Tier 1 is not the mileage. It's the combination of three things: exposure, return elevation, and psychological misjudgment. South Kaibab is fully exposed. No shade, no water, just a direct descent along a ridge line where the canyon shows you exactly what it can do early. On the way down, it feels efficient, controlled even. Bright Angel is a bit easier. It has shade, rest houses, and water access depending on the time of year, which makes it feel safer. That feeling is what gets people into trouble. When considering the rim to rim trail, people typically ask the same questions. How hard is this really? Which trail is worse? And why does the return feel longer than the descent, even though the mileage hasn't changed? The answer is that elevation gain doesn't care how good you felt at mile 2. It only shows up when you've already committed and you're halfway through the hike. For most hikers, this is an all-day commitment, often somewhere around 10 to 14 hours depending on fitness, temperatures, and how often you stop. If you're attempting this in late spring through early fall, you're not starting at 9 a.m. You're starting before sunrise. Many experienced hikers are on the trail by 4:30 or 5 in the morning so they can get as much climbing done before the hottest part of the day. Now, the most common strategy is to take South Kaibab down and Bright Angel up, and that exists for a reason. It front loads the exposure and it gives you water access on the return. And yet, even that best option is still a long, controlled climb in heat with no real escape strategy once you're committed below the rim. This is also where the water question matters the most. And there's no comfortable answer. In warmer months, you're planning liters of water, not just how many little bottles you have. And you treat the refill stations as critical checkpoints, not conveniences. If you only remember one thing about this hike, it's this: going down is optional, coming back up is mandatory. Moving to hike number 2 of our super tough challenges. It's the North Kaibab Trail to the South Rim. It's the rim to rim one day attempt. This is the endurance version of the same idea, and yet it's stretched to its limit. Depending on the route and variations, this is roughly 21 to 24 miles with over 10,000 feet of elevation change. It's not technically complicated. However, it is physically and mentally draining in a way that surprises people who are even used to long hikes elsewhere. The difficulty here is the duration plus environmental swing. You can start in cooler north rim conditions and finish in extreme heat on the south rim, or reverse that depending on logistics. Either way, you're spending most of a day in constant elevation transition with no real flat sections to recover. This is where pacing becomes more important than fitness. Fast starts don't help you here. Efficient energy management does. Now on to the tier 2 hikes, the serious day hikes where mistakes start to cost you. First up is Bright Angel Trail to Plateau Point. This hike is one of the most deceptively structured in the park. It's about 12 miles round trip from the south rim with roughly 3,000 feet of elevation change depending on exact turnaround and conditions. The trail itself feels controlled. It's maintained, it has water stations, and it feels like a managed experience. That's exactly why people misjudge it. The descent feels easy, almost relaxed. The problem is that the return climb happens in accumulating heat, and fatigue builds slowly enough that most people don't notice it until their pace changes dramatically on the way out. This is the classic, it felt fine until it didn't hike. Number 4 on our list of hardest hikes is the South Kaibab Trail to Skeleton Point. Now, for a lot of people, this is the perfect reality check. It's far enough to experience what hiking below the rim actually feels like, yet short enough that you're much less likely to find yourself in trouble if you've planned appropriately. The round trip is roughly 6 miles with about 2,000 feet of elevation change. It doesn't sound extreme, yet South Kaibab's exposed ridgeline and the steep trail make the descent feel faster than it should, which leads people to go farther than they planned. Skeleton Point is often used as a recommended turnaround because beyond that point, you're no longer in short hike territory. You're committing to a deeper canyon descent where turnaround discipline becomes critical. This is where the key question shows up. What is the point where I should turn around? The answer is not a landmark. It's your energy plus your timing. If you're already thinking about the return climb while still going down, that's your signal. A lesser known hike at the Grand Canyon is number 5, Hermit Trail. Hermit Trail changes the type of difficulty slightly, not because it's more extreme, yet because it's less forgiving in terrain quality and structure. Depending on how far you go, you're looking at 8 to 9 miles round trip with several thousand feet of elevation change. The trail is less maintained than corridor routes, meaning loose rocks, uneven footing, and more exposure in sections. This is where hiking becomes less about endurance and more about attention. Every step matters slightly more because the margin for error is smaller. Now, if those first 5 hikes sounded a bit intense for you, don't worry. Tier 3 are our brutal yet manageable if you respect it hikes. Take, for example, Grandview Trail to Horseshoe Mesa. This is one of the steepest maintained trails in the park with roughly 6 to 8 miles round trip depending on turnaround point and about 2,500 feet of elevation change. The descent is controlled yet steep. The real difficulty is the climb out, combined with loose rock and older trail construction that feels less predictable than corridor hikes. This is not the longest hike on the list, yet it is one of the more demanding per mile. The key difference here is terrain. It's a favorite amongst hikers looking for a quieter trail and a more rugged experience than the really busy corridor routes. Last and not least is trail number 7, Tanner Trail. This hike's difficulty is less about length or elevation and more about remoteness and heat exposure. Depending on how far you go, you can easily exceed 8, 14 miles even round trip with significant elevation change and very limited support infrastructure. Unlike Bright Angel or South Kaibab, you're much less likely to see a steady stream of other hikers. On parts of Tanner Trail, you may go quite a while without seeing anyone. The difficulty here comes from isolation. You are farther from help, farther from water access, and more exposed to heat accumulation without relief. This is where mental load becomes part of the physical challenge. The trail feels longer because it's less structured and less trafficked. So what actually makes these hikes hard? Across all of these hikes, the pattern is consistent. Distance matters, yet it's not the main factor. Elevation gain on the return is the real cost. Heat is the multiplier, and water planning is the difference between a long day and a dangerous one. Most people who get into trouble below the rim are not undertrained. They're underinformed at the moment of decision. They go down based on how they feel going down, not how they will feel coming back up. So if you're looking to decide which hike you should actually do, the safest answer is to start smaller than you think you should. Skeleton Point or Plateau Point are often the best introductions because they give you the real canyon experience without forcing you into a full endurance commitment. If you only have one day and want the most complete experience, taking South Kaibab down and Bright Angel up gives you the clearest picture of what the canyon actually is. And it also requires the most respect in planning it. And the most important decision in all of this is simple. Don't let how you feel on the way down determine how far you go, because the canyon will not adjust the climb for your confidence level. The canyon is very consistent. It always gives you exactly what you signed up for. The problem is most people don't realize what they signed up for until they're already halfway through it. If you want more on Grand Canyon hikes, watch episode 74 on hiking into the canyon. If you're awesome enough to look into the full rim to rim experience, episode 76 breaks that down. And if you're planning a national park trip, everything lives at greatescapepodcast.com. I'll see you in the next episode.